All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our May edition of our HR Excellence series for the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Wednesday morning. It is Wednesday, right? We just talked about this, just making sure it's only Tuesday.
It's
Okay,
Tuesday.
Tuesday morning. We know what day it is around here. Tuesday morning today. I'm a day ahead of myself. I'm going to be really sad on Thursday when it's not actually Friday. All right. So welcome to our wonderful webinar here on progression and succession planning, which is a fantastic follow-up to our last webinar that we had in March that was talking about recruiting and onboarding. So if you remember from our recruiting and onboarding conversation, we had talked about an interesting stat that Amy had brought to us from Amy Cell Talent about the fact that around 65% of the workforce will be looking at switching jobs in 2021. So I don't know about you, but that number seems like a really huge number in these cases. And I think we're already starting to see those upticks and people kind of searching around and looking to make changes and moves. So it really does make this progression and succession planning topic even more important. So one of the things that we wrapped up with during our recruiting and onboarding session was how do we keep those people that we actually have in our network and in our companies so that they become a little bit more sticky and we don't lose them and have to do more recruiting and onboarding. So growing our talent and cultivating our own talent within our companies. And how do we do that, especially if we are a small business? So it's such a great topic to be able to hit here today. So just a reminder, I am your HR Excellence Facilitator. It's nice to have you on Hall here with us today. If you do have any questions or have follow-up topics you'd like to discover, or if there's any other topics for webinars you'd like to be able to see, or you just have some general questions, feel free to reach out to me, Julie Miller, President here at Joint Pivot. My contact information is up there as well, or you can find me out on LinkedIn or follow us from our website at jointpivot.com. And you can reach right out to us, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions or put you in contact with any of our previous people that we've had, our presenters that we've had on discussing all these topics as well. So just a reminder from the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce, we really want to make Saline be the best place to do business. So our HR Excellence series is one of those ways that we can reach out to our communities and really provide back to our members. I've got a couple of them highlighted here. So what our HR Excellence series does. One, helping to grow our businesses to give us tools, as a lot of small businesses within the community, to help make sure that we're providing that visibility, jumping on these calls and having these discussions. Having some professional development. Obviously, we are all learning from these webinars from one another. Many of us are not big enough to have our own HR teams within, but we are lucky enough to have a lot of people who are HR people, a lot of our friends in these cases, who we can rely on to come help us out when we have ideas. And I'm happy to share some of my friends with you here today. And then just a reminder, if you haven't seen them already, we've got a bunch of Love on Local signs that are available through the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce. If you don't have one yet and you want one, reach out to me. I can get you in contact with Lori. They're also available for pickup at the Saline Area Chamber offices as well. So it's really nice to see these out there. I know I saw one the other day when I was out on my way to go get ice cream and pointed it out to my parents when they were visiting. So it's really great to see all of that wonderful local support for our Saline area. And then just a reminder on our HR Excellence series. Our goal really is to make sure that we're staying current on the latest HR training and compliance trends. And we've got a bunch of topics that we're looking at covering through the remainder of 2021 here. So as a reminder, our future topics that are coming up to play, I'm actually just going to show you what the rest of 2021 is possibly going to look like here. So in July, we actually have change management coming up, and very, very timely, because one of the things we are working on quite feverishly right now is change management and return to work plans. So how do we get people who are needing to come back into the workplace, who are maybe a little bit reluctant or adjusting to new schedules or to new normals that have happened over the last year and a half. So our change management topic will be right on board. And then September, looking at the impact of changing marijuana laws within the state of Michigan. And then November, actually kind of a follow-up from our succession and progression planning, leadership development and training plans. So today I am very excited to have not one, not two, but three of my friends on here with us to be able to give us some information about progression and succession planning. Our guests today are Miss Brittney Ross, who is an HR business partner at Empower HR. Hi, Brittney. And then we have Miss Jessica Young, our HR business partner, also with Empower HR. Hello, Jessica. And Miss Jennifer Guzmán, who I affectionately know as Goose, Vice President of Client Experience, also at Empower HR as well. And full disclosure, I used to work with a company that Empower HR was one of their subsidiaries, and they have taught me so much about HR during the 3 years that I was there, and consider all of these ladies in Empower HR to be experts when it comes to every single issue that I could possibly run into in these cases. And they have offices in Milwaukee, in Brighton, Michigan, so local here in Michigan as well, in Columbus, Ohio, and Schaumburg, Illinois. I think four office locations that we have here now. And I'll give each of you just a quick opportunity here to introduce yourself as well. All right, so Brittney, if you'd like to go first and just give us a little introduction.
Hi guys, my name is Brittney. I've been with Empower for about 2 years now, with over 8 years of HR experience in the mid-sized market and companies that are scaling to growth. So succession and progression planning is right in my ballpark. And right now, working with clients in COVID, has been a joy to be able to help our clients navigate through the unprecedented, I know I hate that term as well, but unprecedented times, and we continue that 65% sounds unprecedented as well. So excited to, work through and help support you guys here today in the webinar.
Very good. Thanks, Brittney, and we are happy to have you here today. All right, Jessica, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, hey guys, I am Jess Young. I am also an HR business partner at Empower. I have also been with Empower for about 2 years now. Britt and I were actually hired around the same time frame to help us ramp up for a lot of growth that we're experiencing too at Empower. So I love, kind of going through that journey within my own company and helping clients go through that journey at the same time too, because I feel like there's been a lot of learning moments that we've had all together. When we think about business strategy and how we're growing and how we're developing the people in our company. So I also have about 8 years of experience. I feel like I'm copying everything that Britt's already said, but also have about 8 years of experience in HR and kind of took a weird pathway through HR. So I started out in payroll, moved into more of a traditional HR role, moved into a talent acquisition role. So I've kind of seen like the full gamut of a couple of specialty areas within human resources, which I feel like helps me be able to talk to all of those different things as they're coming up in business conversation. So super excited to be here with you guys today. And yeah, looking forward to our discussion.
There you go. It sounds like you did some progression around the HR world there, Jess.
Yes, sure did.
There you go. All right, Jen Guzmán, if you'd like to give us a little introduction, and then you can start right in on some of the insights that you are seeing from our clients at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us today and looking at your lineup, Julie, by the way, and change management next month. I'm like, could your team have picked a better person to go over change management? My name is Jen Guzmán, also known as Jenny, Jennifer, Goose, whatever works for all of you. And I lead client experience for Empower HR. And what that means is the purpose of client experience is ensuring our teams are fully delivering on our purpose. And our purpose is delivering what matters through authentic connections and relentless accountability. So our firm solves people challenges in the areas of human resources. And I like to say, as a pat on the back to our team, that we actually put the human in human resources. So we serve almost 400 small to middle market businesses, over 17,000 worksite employees in the 4 markets that Julie rattled off. I've been humbled to have been here for the last 6 years. I know I started when I was 16 years old. I've been here for the last 6 years. And when we talk about progression and succession, I think sometimes business leaders and teams get really intimidated by what does progression look like and what does growth look like. And it occurred to me that since I started here, when I started here, we had about 150 clients, about 45 employees, 10,000 worksite employees that we serve. So when our teams today are like, oh gosh, I'm kind of intimidated by growth. The fact is, in the last 5 to 6 years, we've already doubled in size. So we had 150 clients. We have almost 400, more than doubled in size. We have almost 400 now. We're on the road to 20,000 worksite employees that we serve this year. We're at over 100 employees. So it's been a privilege, and I'm humbled to have been on this journey with the team that we serve. As part of that journey, I've also worked very intimately with the economic buyers and the user buyers. That's what we refer to as the CEO, founder, or president, or internal HR person at the respective clients that we serve. So I've been able to really focus in on, well, what matters most to those 400 clients. And what we do is we bring that back inside the house so that people like Brittney and Jessica Young, when they're working around the types of strategic initiatives as it pertains to progression and succession, they have a really good understanding of what that means. What is the long-lasting impact? And then again, putting that human element into that, right? A lot of times you have small to middle market businesses that are maybe 20 to say 80 employees, and you've been in business for 20 years. You may have inherited that business from your father or your mother or someone else in the family. So it's your baby, right? It's hard to think, oh gosh, I'm ready to tap out of the game, but who am I going to pass the keys to? So having plans around that are so critical. And what I've learned, especially in the last 9 to 12 months, is that the largest challenges that business leaders are faced with today, especially in the SMB space, are 3 major themes. Number 1 is talent attraction and retention, getting the right people on the team for long-term success or for growth. Some people are like, hey, I'm good with not growing and just being a lifestyle business. That's cool too, but ensuring you have the right team for thriving and surviving. Number 2 would be scaling culture in a remote market. As all of you know, most people are heading back to the office, but there are some businesses that are opting to remain 100% remote. Well, if you have that great small to middle market culture or family-owned business culture, how do you continue to scale that culture? And the last thing I would highlight is supply chain and cost of goods. So all of that sort of ties into the small to middle market space. Makes up 80% of what our country is built upon, right? But right now, this space again is competing with the big guys, because the big guys are able to maybe pay $2 an hour more, allow people to stay remote 100% of the time. And I think that in the next year or so, the people who jump ship, the 63%, will regret some of those changes that are probably based upon emotion, but we can't even look that far right now because we have to solve for the challenge today. So I just wanted to share some of that with all of you, because I'm sure all of you are experiencing the same challenges. And so with that, I will turn it over to HR absolute rock stars, Brittney and Jessica, who will take you through some of how we provide this toolkit or the survival guide for the clients that we serve today who are faced with these challenges. So Julie, we're grateful to be here with you today, and thanks for tagging us in.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you guys here. And as always, if you have any questions as we're going, feel free to throw them in chat, or you can also unmute yourselves and ask the questions as we go. Otherwise, all the questions that you asked when you signed up during registration, those have been provided to Brittney, Jessica, and Jennifer, and we'll be answering them as we go through our session here today. All right, so Jessica and Brittney, I actually have your slides teed up here. Do you want me to run them from here, or would you like to share your screen?
You can go for it if you want to, Julie.
All right, then we will jump right in here, and you can just tell me when I need to move.
All right, so we are going to lay out for you what is succession planning and how does that differ a little bit from progression planning. So when you think about succession planning, you're really focusing on identifying and preparing employees for an open spot, right? And that doesn't always have to equal an executive level position or an ownership level position. Really, that's identifying what business critical roles are there that you need to potentially think about being vacated in the near future or within the next couple of years. So that could be anywhere from somebody retiring, being promoted into another role that's, mission critical, or that person is a potential flight risk that you know about, about, right? So thinking about and having those real conversations with people about how long it's going to take for them to leave or exit an organization is a really important part of succession planning. When you think about progression planning, you're really asking the employee and working with the employee to chart their own progress through the company, right? How are they going to continue upskilling and moving into higher accountability type roles? That doesn't always equal a promotion necessarily, right? There can be progression in, things like skills and aptitudes and stuff like that, but it's really having an individual conversation with employees to understand what value they can continue to add to the organization and still grow and develop themselves and feel some form of progression, right? So I think when you're focusing on succession planning, you're focusing on organizational needs. But when you're focusing on progression planning, that's where some of that magic happens with the employee feeling like they have their own autonomy, right, to be able to progress and learn new things within the organization. So Britt, I don't know if you had anything else to add in here on the difference between succession and progression planning.
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head, Jess. And I would just say, I think, in the small to mid-sized market, I feel that, we're all maybe talking about that succession planning and more casual conversation, but progression planning is where you're kind of like, I don't have a growth path for my employees and things of that nature. So I know you're probably sitting here thinking, hey, like, how do I even start this process? And we'll go over that in the next couple of slides. But I know for the small to mid-sized market, the progression planning is something that you're like, I'm not sure quite how to do that with my size, right? So we'll dig in a little bit deeper there for you throughout the presentation.
That sounds great. And I think the one thing that I had heard once, kind of, me, I'm a data girl and I look at all things as an equation sometimes, that you can't have succession planning without progression planning, because progression planning allows you to train and build up some of those successors in those cases. So you could possibly do progression planning without succession, but you can't do succession without progression planning. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could, Julie, you could definitely do it. It might not be as successful. You might have more competency gaps. But if you want to make sure you close those competency gaps, you definitely wanted to have the progression planning be a part of your succession planning exercise.
Perfect. Great. All right, shall I move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I love planning. I want to know why planning is important.
I know, this is Julie's life right here. So, planning for this stuff is so important because you're really preparing, for attrition, right? Which we're all struggling with right now. I think every single business that we work with across every industry is experiencing either the fear of potential attrition or they just can't hire good help, right? When they're losing people. So absolutely 100% important for preparing for that attrition. That's gonna happen. It's inevitable in every business, right? Nobody sticks around forever. And then, calibrating performance potential of your current talent is also really important, right? So as Britt alluded to, like thinking about some of those skill gaps that you might have that you need to fill in with your current talent that you have on tap. And really that's going to help drive employees wanting to retain their employment with you, right? When they feel like they're having open and honest conversations with their leadership team about career growth opportunities. Also really important to help link strategic business plans to employee development, right? So when you're thinking about succession planning, you're also tying that into, hey, where do I want to be in 5 years? And do we have the people on tap right now who are going to get us there within 5 years? Do I need to think about investing in some, upskilling for those individuals, or do I need to hire from the outside, right? So those are all things that you're tying to your strategic business plan, which is really important to think about how you're going to develop those employees or potentially hire from the outside. And then of course, this is helping with job transitions and promotions that are happening internally. Of course, if your business is big enough to, have multiple positions in the same department.
And I love that you touched on that, Jess, that the planning for employees and progression in these cases is part of your strategic business plan. So I obviously do a lot of strategic business planning with a lot of different sized businesses across the board. And in many cases, what we get really excited about in those strategic plans is the physical stuff, like the big plans of growth of our processes or our business or our portfolio. And not very often does the planning and the training actually pop up on the strategic plan, but I view it as the foundation in those cases. Like we don't even get to do that other stuff unless we have the right people in place and if we've got the right progression plans in place. So I love the approach that you guys are taking of making sure that that stuff is tied right into the strategic business plans.
Yeah, and Julie, just to add on that, I think it's important, and what I do with my clients is like essentially setting the stage, right? It's hard as, you know, especially a smaller size business where you're not planning for any loss of employees, is that, or you're saying like, hey, my team, they're solid, they're here with me till the end. But if you think as a leader, what happens if I lose a critical role, right? What happens if my VP of operations leaves the organization? What type of gap or what type of domino effect is that going to have throughout my business, right? And I think as much as we don't want to look at the negative side of things, it's critical that we plan for that for business continuity perspective. And I think COVID and the pandemic has really taught us that. There's companies that had to go without leaders for, 2 weeks as they were, maybe exposed or had COVID, or maybe even longer, or had to pivot in different ways this year. And I think, what the companies have had to go through this year and what I've seen my clients go through is I'm having a lot more people saying, hey, let's remember that succession plan or, that, exercise that you talked about last year. I now understand the importance of that on how we've had to pivot our business and the changes that we've had to make of reorging or making ourselves a little more lean to be able to survive the pandemic. I think it's important that we don't just push it to the side, that we make it a part of our, quarterly routine as we're talking, because I don't think any of us projected that COVID-19 was going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't want any more bad juju coming our way, but I think it's important to say we've been through unprecedented times. As an organization, let's learn from it, let's grow from it, incorporate some of these plans because we don't really know what's going to happen next. And this last year has taught us that.
Sure. And I love that you mentioned too, I had coached a client one time and they were very concerned that their organization or their leaders were trying to put progression and succession planning around their position that they were currently sitting in, because they immediately kind of freaked out and were like, oh my gosh, they're planning to replace me. Like they're trying to figure out a way around this. And I was like, let's reframe that conversation and take a look at it as they care enough about everybody in the organization to make sure that there's a backup plan for every situation that could happen or the critical situations that could happen. So instead of looking at it as, are they trying to replace me? Look at it as a way of, my role is critical enough that I'm happy that they're thinking about this in this specific area and that they're thinking about this in other areas to make sure that everybody is safe. It's not essentially a personal decision in those situations, but realize that can happen when you jump and you start looking at progression and succession planning. There could be people who view it that way.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the reasons why talking about business alignment is so important too, and kind of using that as your guide or as your North Star, is it creates alignment with everybody who's got a stake in the game here, right? I think we work with so many clients who are like, progression has to be owned by the employee themselves, right? Like they've got to want it. They've got to want to learn new skills. They've got to want to invest in their own continuous learning. But when you look at it from a business perspective, you've got alignment from the top down and from the bottom up too, right? If that employee is having a conversation with their manager about their progression, that also ties into the strategic goals of the business. And if you're thinking about the strategic goals of the business and what you need to have from a skill perspective, you're going to want to make those investments in people and throw a couple of extra dollars into training and development for people, right? If you're truly thinking about the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? And who you need to get there and what skills you potentially need to get them in order to do it. You're making an investment for the future, right? When you're investing in development and growth.
Exactly, exactly. So one of the biggest questions we got from multiple people was, I'm a small business. What's available to me? I'm not like a Ford or GM that's sitting out there with huge departments that have people that just do this. So when you're talking about some of our smaller businesses where you're talking about 200 or 250 worksite employees, what's available for them? What are you giving out there? What are you guiding them on? What methods can they start to use?
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes too that I know a lot of maybe HR professionals out there are going to cringe when I say this, but I'm actually okay with some just informal conversations happening with this, right? Like, I don't
Nothing.
always has to be extremely structured. If you're a company of 2 individuals, yeah, you have 2 critical positions, right? If one of you, something happens, you're going to need a game plan for business continuity to fill that gap. I would definitely say that at least if you're having those informal conversations, you're having a game plan, right? You don't necessarily need all those tools. There are some amazing tools out there. If you're looking to advance from that, there is a like an Excel version that you could utilize. I apologize. Is the image on here as well? I don't know
it's 2 slides away. So
I'm
yeah,
sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
We'll get there in a sec. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll show you that tool. But the 9-box is also, our recommended tool as it relates to succession planning and just understanding who are your high potentials and who are your next like on deck for your critical roles. And really with a 9-box, you kind of need structure in your organization in order to utilize a 9-box appropriately. I wouldn't necessarily recommend a 9-box for like a company of 10 employees. It really has to be, I would say, the 20 plus range when you're really looking at multiple skill sets and multiple departments that you're evaluating as it relates to the 9-box.
And I would say one tip on that too, if you are smaller than that, just any sort of categorization you can give, whether it's an ABC assessment or good or bad, whatever, smiley face, frowny face, something that helps you differentiate between potential like coach up or coach out in those cases.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a quick visual of the 9-box that we wanted to go over real quick.
Yeah.
So the 9-box obviously has 9 boxes. It's super easy tool to use if you've got multiple people in a department, right? And it's really critical for identifying your potential next leaders, right? When you think about performance and potential, you've got those 2 accesses that are laid out on the graph. And anybody that you've got sitting up in that upper right-hand quadrant are identified as your high potential candidates for succession. While those in the lower left quadrant, we know we're going to need to potentially reassign them into another role, or they're at the point where they do need to be coached out of the organization. So you've really got a good opportunity here to go through and map out, if you've got multiple people in your department, where they sit in each one of these boxes. And that will help you then realize what they need to do to get to that next level. You can think about what skills they might need to move into a leadership position, right? If they're sitting up in that upper right-hand quadrant of the box, or if they're a high professional, but they don't necessarily want to grow in their career too. You've got a really solid, reliable person in that role that you might be able to give stretch assignments to, right? Or grow and develop in small ways, but they don't necessarily need to be promoted into another formalized position, right? So when you utilize tools like this, this, you literally go through these boxes and you write down the individual's names. Obviously you're doing this in confidence amongst the leadership team, but you're going through and you're writing down individuals' names in each one of these boxes so that you've got clearly mapped out. I would say this happens at least once a year, typically when you're doing your annual review process, but the more frequently you can do it so that you're having those conversations with employees about what they need to do to grow and upskill and get into that next level position is really important. Or if you need to have those coaching conversations on the bottom left-hand side, that those are happening on a frequent basis too.
And I would build off of what Jessica is saying. Is you say these conversations, I think half the battle is being honest with yourself and the individual. If it is a low performer, an inconsistent performer, what is at stake if you don't make a change, right? If you don't start having those conversations with them. And it never is easy to have a hard conversation with an employee. Let's say there's somebody who's been around for 20 years. Maybe you inherited them from the previous owner of the business or leader of the business. So they've been loyal, et cetera. But if your goal is to grow and this person is blocking the ability to grow, having that tough conversation to begin to exit them out unless they want to get on the same page is definitely hard. But I want to just make sure, I think a lot of our clients struggle with that today. Like X person has been on the team for 10 years and they started the business with me, but what's at stake? Well, the stake at stake is how they're impacting the other people around them. So if you have C players that are still on the team, they start impacting the A and B players. They may get in the way of driving revenue, whatever that is. So having those honest conversations with yourself first, if you're willing to keep those people on the team, understanding what will be at stake, and then following up with those courageous conversations are so critical. So the 9 box is only as good as the action that follows following the 9 box.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the 9 box too can be used as it relates to progression planning, right? So when you have those individuals labeled in the grower boxes, you're going to know that if you don't have, a position opening up in the next year or two, they could be more high risk to exit the organization. So what tools are you utilizing, or trainings, or techniques or conversations are you having with those individuals to give them the ability to retain them while they don't seek employment to grow elsewhere? Because that's, unfortunately, we deal with that a lot in the small business space, where you have someone that has the urge to grow. The company just isn't at that level yet. So how do you retain those individuals? And one of the things I like to recommend to my clients that don't have the ability to automatically put that individual in the role is to challenge them in other avenues, put them on special projects, utilize cross-functional training, because if you do have a vacancy in another department, if this individual is a high performer and a grower, they may be open to different challenges and opportunity, and that will help overall some gaps if you have a gap in a different functional area. So utilize cross-functional training, utilize, any sort of certifications, development. You can also have them just run sidecar with the position that they're keyed up for, right? So having them tag along, giving them a seat at the table for certain conversations to give them the progression and the challenge that they're looking for until you're ready for them to fill that next seat, I think is important to identify along with the 9 box activity, so that okay, now I have a high potential. I don't have a seat, I don't have a vacancy for them to plug right now. I mean, maybe something will come up sooner than we anticipate. But what skills do we need to get them ready for that seat, or how can we keep them warm until that seat becomes available?
I love this. And one of the tips I have actually for this, because we use this quite often in planning as well, when you have leadership teams or groups that don't necessarily dig in, like you said, on having some of those tough conversations, I like to have each individual leader or a person who is part of the planning process, you slot all of their employees as well as the employees of the other leaders as well, and then compare in the group, because then that shows me where I might have a blind spot, or I might see something in somebody else that their leader doesn't see in these cases. And I may have somebody in a high potential box and they're like, that person is a blocker all day long. And I might not see it in those cases. So it's really good in driving those conversations. I've actually used this even down to the point of having my employees slot themselves as to where they thought they would be, because then I can have a better understanding too of where they see themselves. And I can tell you very early in my career, I had an employee who really just wanted to be a high professional. He really just wanted to do what it was that he was doing. And at that point in my life, I thought everybody wanted to grow in positions and they wanted to take on more and do more. And this person really just wanted to stay what they were doing. And I wouldn't have known that had I not had him take a look at the 9-box. And he identified himself as a high professional or a solid professional. Like that's where he wanted to stay and that's what he wanted to do. He had no emotion behind moving over into any sort of other high potential box. So there's a lot of different ways that this could be used. Well, it's just a simple matrix. It is so powerful in the way that you can utilize this. So I love that you guys are sharing this.
And Julie, I love what you just added there about including the employee into the process, right? Like, obviously, like Jessica mentioned, a 9-box can be a confidential, like closed door conversation that you have amongst the leadership team, but understanding where the employee sees themselves as part of this process is extremely important, because you don't want to be pushing someone, having them take on more responsibility if they're super comfortable where they're at, or you don't want to assume someone's comfortable and they're, they don't know how to advocate for themselves and what their professional growth needs are. And they're wanting more and you're not giving it to them because you think that they're a solid professional or a high professional. So having those conversations, on a quarterly basis, at least with your employees or during the annual review process is a great time to say, like, where do you see yourself in a couple? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? That age-old interview question. But, where do you see yourself growing with the organization? Where do you see, do you have other interests in other functional areas that you may want to explore within the organization? Having those conversations is only going to make your organization stronger, or just gain ability to know if you have a critical role that's maybe they'll say, hey, I'm actually exploring other opportunities. Now, all right, let's start the succession planning exercise. So the more open and transparent conversations you can have on where your employees see themselves, the more you can plan and align the business.
Perfect. I love this. Great tool. All right. Do we
All
want to
right.
talk about succession planning readiness?
Sure.
All right.
Here's that famous chart you just referred to, Britt.
I'm excited. I love this chart.
Yeah, for sure. So this chart is super simple, right, Julie? If you just flip to the next little visual we've got.
There we go.
Yeah. So, this chart is super simple. Obviously, you see those mission critical roles up at the top that we've got outlined. We, have a list of individuals, if this were filled in, that you would see who are ready to slot into those positions now. You've got those who are on deck in the next couple of years. And then you've got those high potentials, right? Those people who were hanging out in the top right-hand corner of the 9-box exercise that we just showed, who might be ready in the next 6 or so years to move into that executive level role. And again, this doesn't need to just be for those in the C-suite. This can be for any mission critical role at your business that if you lose that person, your business is in big trouble, right? So I would encourage you guys, as you're thinking about succession planning, to go through and chart things out like this. It's super simple, easy tool. You can do it in a really fast amount of time, right? But as you're having conversations with people and figuring out what motivates them, I think that this is, what's at the crux of all of this is having individual conversations with people and figuring out what their motivations are, and figuring out how those motivations sometimes change, right? We live in a fast-paced world, and what I was happy with 6 months ago is probably not what I'm happy with now. So thinking about growing and learning and what that individual person's motivation is to be able to get them to the next level is all a part of the foundation or the crux of having these types of conversations. So Britt, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else here to our little chart that we've got going on.
No, Jess, you did a great job explaining it. I just kind of HR geek out with stuff like this. a little bit because it's exciting, right? To be able to have something that's so simplistic, that can really be a game changer for your organization, right? So, and I would just add, and build on that this tool is going to help you have those conversations of what skill deficiencies do these individuals have? Why are you labeling them in 6+ years? Like what attributes or what competencies do they need to be showing you in order to move on deck? Make sure you identify those so that you can incorporate that, and into a development plan with this employee, or having conversations or getting them involved in additional training, certifications, conversations around the organization to help build their skill set. And again, that transparency of conversation to let the employee know, like, hey, here's some areas we'd love to see you grow and develop in. Is this something you'd like to do and participate in? Because we'd love to invest in you as an individual in our organization. Like, what a great culture play there, right? That employee is feeling that investment from you as a company stakeholder. So I would just, encourage you to utilize this to identify those skill deficiencies and come up with a plan in order to get the employee up to that next level, so that you don't have any critical position gaps at your organization when you need it the most.
Mm-hmm. And I love the thought that you put into this, because it seems like such a simple tool, but oftentimes it's the conversation around just filling in the boxes that happens that really helps us to identify where those gaps might be. Because one of the things I've done when we have been working with teams on this is, what do you need to see this person demonstrate before they move from hypo to on deck? And what do you need to see them demonstrate before they move from on deck to ready now? And that's one of those things, because we've probably all been in organizations before where we've seen some very, very technically sound people be promoted into leadership positions, where there was not a lot of succession or progression planning done in those cases to get that person developed to be ready to step into the position. And I'll ask, like, are you sure that person is ready to go? And it hurts me when they say, well, we'll see. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we just did not set that person up for success in these cases. And hope is not a strategy that we just can't just expect that person. Sometimes it works out well and it's great and it was the best move we've ever done because the person can take it on and they're ready and prepared. But then sometimes we can lose a very, very technically sound person who was fantastic in what they were doing, because we've promoted them too quickly and we didn't think about everything else that they needed to be able to showcase and do and prepare them before they stepped into position. And that sits on us as leaders. Like, we have to make sure we're setting up our people for success when we're moving them into these positions, for sure.
Yeah, and it seems almost morbid to think about, but that's for the long term, but also for the short term, for small to middle market businesses, usually these mission critical roles are one person. So you have a lot of information, knowledge, and growth tied to those people. So we affectionately refer to it as the beer truck, right? God forbid you have one killer salesperson that drives all your funnel and all your growth. If that person were to quit on you or decide they're moving to Tibet or something, what are you going to do to make sure you cannot impede the growth of your business by having that critical role move out? So yes, there's a long-term progression and succession as it goes, but there's also a now that you have to solve for as well.
And I think too, to build on that, Jen, is that you think about, to Julie, to your point, if you have someone that maybe you have them on deck and the position becomes void because someone just resigns, right, and has all that knowledge transfer that doesn't, or has a short window to happen in, if you have a transition window at all, as leaders, identify, okay, that person we've labeled on deck 1 to 3 years, because we've planned and know their competency, skill deficiencies, we can plan for that and provide that individual more support as they're in that VP of sales role. We know we're putting them in a little bit early, but we know where we need to provide additional support and help to help them feel that we're setting them up for success and supporting them in this new role, versus just throwing them out into the world and not where they don't feel like they're supported, and you're not throwing them that life raft. They're going to feel like they're drowning really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. Good, good. So I've got a couple questions for you guys on this of ones that have came in before. One of the things that we talked a little bit about in the recruiting and onboarding session was around kind of our new workforce that's coming in that wants like a new title, a new raise, a new challenge every like 8 to 12 months. You know, they should be president by the time they're 26. So when we talk about progression, I know you're all laughing because you've heard this. It's like, just create your own company. You can be your own president. Maybe that's what I did. So that's where when we talk about progression planning over time that we're looking at, does progression always have to equal vertical moves, or what opportunities do we have from a horizontal perspective, especially with some of our smaller businesses?
Yeah, no, I feel like there's a huge stigma in the business world, right? Like, and that's sometimes perpetuated by companies themselves, that success equals us moving up the ladder or moving up the food chain, right? Which is not always true. And I think that's where tapping into what truly is somebody's motivations and what are their skill levels and their passions in certain things to be able to find them the right fit at the time that the business needs it is what's really important here. We work with clients all the time who they have maybe even long tenured employees who think that the next move for them is to be promoted into another position. And they're seeing some of the younger generation move through roles really fast. And they're also going, oh, shoot, like, shouldn't I be moving through roles this fast too? Right. And it's really taking a second to step back and say, do you really want that? Or do you really like that? Or, do you see yourself in this position? And it's okay if you don't. I'm not going to view you as a failure because you don't want to be promoted into that next position. And you're just okay with being the high professional, right? And that's perfectly fine. It's just, you've got to figure out if that's that person's motivation. And if there's something that's happening that doesn't fall within their, motivation, is that going to cause a flight risk or a potential risk to the business for you?
Okay.
Yeah, I think too, also like understanding, what means challenge to that employee. I'm a prior sport athlete, so I'm always up for a challenge. I know Jennifer does a great job with that with our clients, with me, and I appreciate the challenge, right? So what challenges can you present to your employees that are going to give them that progression feeling? And how do those employees like to be recognized? I know that's not necessarily a progression, but understanding how your employees like to be recognized is going to make them feel that they have some natural progression. So how are you rewarding them? And it might just not be compensation or promotion driven. It could be that you're, global, recognizing them on a team call, and that's going to make it feel like they got a promotion for the day, right? So I think there's, a rewards and recognition process to this that can help. At least it may be like band-aiding it for a little bit, but having a better understanding of what that employee is looking for as it relates to that growth and recognition can be really helpful in these certain situations where they're asking for more and you don't know what to give them.
Sure, that totally makes sense. And I always share with people my experience. I was in an energy company for almost 10 years. My title never changed the entire time that I was there. I was always the director of continuous improvement and operational excellence. But my boss, Dan, there, he every year found something to add onto my plate that was going to challenge me in those cases that I didn't know if I was going to be able to do. And people would ask, like, don't you get annoyed that you're still a director, still a director, still a director? I was like, no, because every year this job is more and more challenging. There's something else that's being thrown at me that is stressing me out, or it's having me grow. It's making me look for other training opportunities, other things that I'm looking at to expand what I can do. So there's also that opportunity as well, even when we can't necessarily create a new role or move somebody into a new position. So I love that that's always options as well. Another question we got is some of our small businesses don't necessarily have a ton of internal training options. Like we don't have our HR, we don't have our own L&D departments, or we don't really have a huge continuing education budget. So what recommendations do you have out there for our small businesses that need a little direction as to what's out there and available for them if they don't have it internally?
Yeah, LinkedIn Learning is a fantastic tool that is extremely low cost, most of the time free, right? That employees can, tap into, watch little quick videos on certain tracks within LinkedIn, and then take quizzes at the end that gets them badges that they can post on their profile. So there's some really good business skill topics in there. There's even a whole human resources tracked inside of LinkedIn Learning that's really fantastic that you can recommend employees to utilize. And I personally really liked it because it gives you that fun little button at the end that you can post on your profile, which everybody likes. It's instant recognition, right? Instant gratification.
Absolutely. I love it. I love that. And you can even sit down with your employees and create a track in LinkedIn Learning and have them participate into what things they might want to do and be able to get reports from that. So I think that's kind of been an incredible advance when it comes to learning, of not having to have your own internal LMS system. LinkedIn actually has that for you now, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, I think like
Go ahead, Jess.
leveraging your team, right, to provide training, leveraging other leaders to, help grow and develop. It's always good, and I absolutely love this in my own professional career. You can always learn something from someone. So do you have a mentor program that's set up within your organization where you can get perspective of a different leader to help challenge your thinking around things? And the other thing that I absolutely love is like a good old fashioned book club around leadership, right? Like leadership books that can help challenge conversation within your organization, or healthy habits, or whatever it may be, that kind of gives them homework on the side, but also can help them think about how they want to develop as leaders, but also may bring some really great ideas to the table on how you can improve processes at your organization. So there's some like old school ways of, just continuing education, leveraging your own internal, leadership, and like just LinkedIn Learning. And they sometimes will do free courses, which is absolutely amazing. So definitely like utilizing the free resources out there would definitely be my recommendation for small and mid-sized businesses.
I would also say too, utilize the members within the Saline Area Chamber, because one of the things that I loved doing when I was part of a co-op program, actually in high school, so this is a gazillion years ago, but going around and seeing what other businesses are doing in those same positions. So maybe you don't have the training or the mentorship available in your own company, but maybe there's opportunities to be able to have mentors within other of our local companies here that could do similar things, adjacent things, or maybe completely opposite things, but they have the same types of positions that you can say, hey, go to work with that person for a day and see what they're doing, and then have them come here to see the two different environments, to see the two different cultures, to see the opportunities there, and be able to observe from that aspect of it and see what you're learning, because that's free too. That's an awesome way to kind of get out there and help continue to build the relationships within the community as well.
I love that, Julia. That's such a great idea. Just
It's
like,
fun.
Hey, like COVID has taught us anything, we can't do it without each other. So definitely lean on, each other and other businesses, and, empower if you need us. We're definitely here for you.
There you go. The other question I just wanted to touch on a little bit as well is, a lot of the times when people are thinking about the high level of talent that they need, sometimes they're like, well, I don't have it internally. Can't I just hire that position or that talent specifically from the outside when I need it? What does that do to the culture? Like, what does that say internally to the people that are there? And would you recommend that or not?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, right? So I think it really depends on where you have people slated in this tool, right? So if you have someone that's in the ready now and you're going out externally, that could cause some culture issues, or just making that employee upset as they feel like they have the next seat for that position. Sure. Now, if you have high potentials that are going to be ready in the next 6 years, I think giving them the why behind why you're hiring externally will do wonders for that change management of why you're hiring externally, for their own personal growth and development. We're trying to find someone bring them in here that's going to challenge our processes, help us grow, and help you grow as individuals so that you can further your growth with our organization. I think that's like really the band, the on deck and high potential band that you can have those why conversations with, those directly impacted individuals. But the ready now, you should just be prepared that that individual will most likely leave if you don't have a real good solid why, right?
Absolutely.
I want to, and I'm watching the time. So I would say, as a build on what Britt is saying, the number one job as a leader is to create context.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to that conversation, if there are milestones that the employee needs to hit in order to be that ready now, having active, constant performance feedback, not a once a year performance review, a monthly or bi-monthly cadence by which you are giving that feedback. And again, it's hard to give that feedback, and I know you've heard this a million times, but if you truly care about that person, you're going to give them the feedback and you're going to tell them exactly what's getting in their way. And in the long run, hiring from the outside, articulating to that individual that it's not about them, it's about the greater impact and the mission of the organization, and saying, hey, you're going to be able to learn 1, 2, 3 things from this person we're bringing in, which is going to get you to that next level. It's all about how you frame that context and ensuring you're having that frequent communication with that person. So I think that that's important. And I think sometimes that's where we get held up, is not creating that context. Then you have,
then we have problems.
Right, exactly.
Very true. All right. So for anybody who's got questions for our wonderful group of experts here, feel free to unmute yourself or throw your questions in chat. Or I'm also going to throw up their information here as well. And you'll be getting a copy of this presentation. So you'll be getting all the contact information for Brittney, Jessica, and Jennifer here today to ask any follow-up questions. And you can also contact me as well. But I'll give everyone just a second to ask any questions if they have them.
Yeah, we're open to be available for side conversations at any point, as Julie mentioned. So if you can't think of anything right now and you watch the recording again, feel free to hit us up.
Yeah, especially for those who are on the recording, who are just watching the recording, not here with us live. Feel free to follow up with us if you do have questions. We're happy to talk about this stuff. All right. Well, that was a super fun hour. I know a little bit more about progression and succession planning, and you guys have thrown some additional ideas my way that I had not thought about on how I can help clients as well. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to have you here with us today and to be able to share all of your expertise with those who we've had on our call with us here today. We'll stick around for just a couple seconds here after the close of the call. But like always, please let us know if you have any questions. And I can't wait to see you guys in July when we talk about change management. So we will see you all then. So thank you, Brittney, Jessica, and Jennifer. And thank you everyone for dialing in here with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.